Alright, so for this video we're going to discuss how you take actions on your turn and what you do when you place an action tile at a certain location, what that location is going to give you, and additional benefits as well. So to start with, let's just say I decided I wanted to take this action here, this green one here, which is going to allow me to move my marker up 2 spaces on the Federation tract, okay, if I was to take that action. If I was to take that action, I would first, of course, put my action tile here to indicate that this is the action I'm taking. But that's not all I have to do. I also must play a card as well. So there are cards that you're going to have in your hand. Maybe one of these cards you have in your hand you don't like, but that's just what you have. So you can play any cards you want to basically pay for this location. It's almost, in a sense, if you think of it in that way, that you're actually almost paying a card in order to take an action. That's kind of how it works. Because when you do this, you're going to lose the card. So if I chose this card here to take this action, I would lose this card. It would get discarded. And I wouldn't get the effect of this card either, because as you can see, it's a red card, and this is a green location, okay? But sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you don't have all 3 colors available, but you definitely want to take a particular colored action. Maybe you want to take one of the orange ones, but you don't have any orange cards, but you need the stuff from the orange location, and so basically you have to discard a card from your hand regardless of the color anyways. Now, if the card is the exact color, what's going to happen is then you'll get to claim said card. Now, some cards can only be played instantly, while other cards can be played later down the road. This is a protection card here. You'll notice it has gears on the top left corner. That means that once you claim this card, you won't get the benefit of this card until the next production phase. So you'll just set it aside face up in front of you, and you'll hold on to this card if you do manage to claim this card, because you took this action here and you played this green one to do so, okay? Then there are these cards here. You'll notice it has an A on it. When you claim this card, you'll claim it. So let's say if I took the action on the red space, I went there, took this action, I could claim this card, okay? Now this is an action card, and it can only be activated when you go to a spot that's going to activate action cards. So if you use this card at this particular red location, then you'll just simply claim it, putting it face down in front of you with that production card you might have played earlier as well, okay? And you'll just hold off and you won't utilize it right now, and you'll take the action at the red location. The only way you're going to play these action cards here is if you take an action at a spot that has the action ability, okay? There are 2 of them on this side of the board. One of them is over here. So if I was, for instance, was able to take this action here at the orange location, I could take an action card I have in play, meaning this wouldn't be in play because this would be in my hand, so I wouldn't be able to use this, but if I had an action card, I could play it if I went there, okay? Along with something else, I'd get to do 2 different things at that location, but one of them would allow me to take the action card that I have in play, if I have one, and play it. So the only way that I could play this action card is if I went to this location here. The only way I could play this card and activate it is if I was to take this action here, which lets me build a tunnel as well as take an action, okay? So I can do one or the other, which is pretty cool for sure as well. That's another thing to note. When you decide to take an action at one of these locations, unless the location says or do this or do that, if it doesn't have that, then you have the option to do both. You can do both of these in a sense. So I could build a tunnel and I could play an action card I have in play if I was to take this action, okay? But I would not have to do both if I don't want to. So maybe I don't want to build a tunnel right now, or maybe I don't want to play an action card, but I want to build a tunnel. But still, if I was to go here, I would have to take the action at that location, at least one of the things there. In order to put my action tile there, I have to perform at least one of those functions. But the cool thing is, if I was to play this color card here, this red one, and it's an action card, and I choose this as an action spot, I can choose to either claim this first or activate this card if it was a lightning bolt. If it had the lightning bolt on it and I was at an orange location, I could, for instance, play it before I take the action at the action location. So if my thing was up here, for instance, my action tile was up there, and I used this card to correspond with that location, I could take this card and play it before I perform the action at that location. Or I could perform the action at that location before I play this card here. So that's kind of a cool option. So if I wanted to play the action card on this red one immediately, the only way to do it is if I was to put my action tile here first and use it to claim this card, putting it face down in front of me, and then I could take the action, play one of my action cards, which would be this card here. Pretty cool. Or any other action card I might have. That's pretty cool. Now I say any action card you might have because everybody starts with one action card. Your personal assistant is an action card, and you can use him to take this action. So I can use my dolphin here to take an action. If I was to go there, I could use him to either get 1 plasteel or 1 credit. If I was to use my personal assistant here. Pretty cool for sure. I like that. That's another thing you can definitely do. That's a pretty cool thing. Personal assistant. Okay? So that's one thing you can do. But if you use an action card, one thing you'll need to note is after you're done with the action card, you're going to have to flip it over, okay? Indicating that you've used it, okay? So if I was to use this action card, I would have to flip it over, and the only time I get to use this action card again, unless I had a card that let me flip it back over to use it again, I wouldn't be able to flip this over normally until the production phase. At the end of the production phase, all action cards that were used would then get flipped over, and I would get to do this again for the next era. So that's how action cards are going to work, basically. That's how you're going to work. So they're a one-time use per era. So you're only going to use these 3 times in the course of the game at most, or at least, and maybe you might get to play 1 or 2 of them later down the road if you get a certain card that lets you, do these again. But that's how that's going to work. Now, another thing to note is while you're only allowed to have 3 cards in your hand, as far as cards that you have in play, that includes action cards, that includes cards that have this gear symbol on them, production cards, and that also includes cards that also have, if I can find one, let's see, where is it? Oh, here we go. Here's one. You'll notice this one has a symbol, an infinite symbol on it. This is something that could happen several times once per round. So this is a type of card that could activate once per round, okay? Which is kind of cool that you'll have something like this as well. If you have this card, and this card, these 3 cards here are the 3 main cards that you could technically have in play. And there's ones that have these as well. There's these 2. These are the other 4. There's 5 different cards in total, but this 5th one here is only to give you extra victory points. So it's only going to work with victory points, but this is a card in a sense that would count toward the 4-card limit. Because in order to have cards in play, you can't have as many cards as you want in play, which is very different because Terraforming Mars, which is very similar to this game, Terraforming Mars would let you have as many cards as you wanted in play to keep. I remember having dozens of cards that were giving me all sorts of effects that I had them in play because I had so many of those blue ones in play. But in this game, you're limited to 4 max. And that includes your personal assistant. If your personal assistant is already counts as 1, that means you're only going to get 3 more. But this is why he might not stick around for long, because he's not as useful as some of the other action cards are, and you can discard him so that way you can add a 4th one to the equation, a 4th one from one of the piles, obviously. So you can, for instance, don't always, so once you have a card in play, let's say these are the 4 cards I have in play, and I wanted to put a 5th, I wanted to put another one that wasn't one of these into play, I could discard one of these instead, so that way I could add the new one in, basically add the new one to my in play section. And that would include the dolphin. I could discard my personal assistant as well in order to do so. So that's something interesting to note. Now the cool thing is normally these action cards are only going to be utilized, obviously this lightning bolt doesn't count because lightning bolts are cards that have an instant effect. So once you're done with this effect, it immediately gets discarded. So it's actually not one of the 4 that you would have. This is going to be probably what you would have in your hand. This could be the potential 4 that you have in your hand here. I forgot the lightning bolt is not going to stick in your hand. It's going to you're going to play it and you're going to lose it. You're going to discard all the lightning bolts, whether you get to activate their effects or not. Or choose to, you're going to lose them regardless. But if you decide to claim these cards and put them in play, you can only have 4 of these. And but that's something to note. Now, where was I? So, yes. So obviously, these 2 cards here are only going to activate in certain instances. This one's going to activate at certain times, probably once per turn. This is going to activate only during the production phase. But these are only going to be activated when you play a action tile at an action location to activate these action cards. But there is one other way you can activate these cards. Let's say I never got around to playing my personal assistant. I used my other action card probably, and some of the other action cards I might have, and I might not necessarily have used my personal assistant to acquire a plastil or a credit. But I already have 4 cards in play here, and I want this new card here that's going to help me out quite a bit during the next production phase. I could, before discarding this dolphin to add this one to the equation, I could actually play it as I'm discarding it, getting the instant benefit of whatever it may be. So that personal assistant will still give me something if I later discard this down the road. Now, if I had played it, so if it was like this and I'm discarding it, I would get no additional benefit. So I wouldn't recommend playing him if you're planning on discarding him later, because then you'll get basically a free bonus for discarding him. And you can do that with any of the other action cards as well. You can activate them if they haven't been played yet, to exchange it for another card you might want to have in play. But like I said, maximum of 4 you can have, so I'd have to discard one of these because I have 5 right now, and these would stay in play. So that's how that is going to work. That's how the action cards are going to work. Okay, so in the next video, let's actually talk about all of these here and what they're going to do for you.